Picture this. You're scrolling through your phone at 11 p.m., and suddenly an ad pops up for something you didn't even know existed 5 seconds ago. But now you absolutely need it. Your finger is hovering over that buy now button. Your heart rate is slightly elevated, and you're already imagining how much better your life will be once this thing arrives at your doorstep. Sound familiar? What if I told you that it's a simple trick that could save you thousands of dollars per year without requiring any willpower, disciplined, or dramatic lifestyle changes? And the crazy part is, most people who try this method end up buying less than 10% of the things they originally thought they needed. My name is Joe, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, consumer psychology, and why our brains are basically wired to make us broke. If you've ever wondered why you keep buying stuff you need and then feeling guilty about it later, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you save some serious cash. Now, before we dive into what makes the 72-hour rule so powerful, let me ask you something. When was the last time you bought something on impulse and then actually used it regularly for more than a month? Maybe you can think of 1 or 2 examples, but I'm willing to bet that most of your impulse purchases are either sitting in a closet somewhere, gathering dust on a shelf, or creating guilt every time you see them because they remind you that you wasted money. Here's the thing that most people don't understand about impulse buying. It's not a character flaw. It's not because you're bad with money or lack self-control. Your brain is literally designed to make impulsive decisions, and companies spend billions of dollars every year figuring out exactly how to exploit that design flaw. Think about it this way. Our ancestors who hesitated too long before grabbing food or running from danger didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. So we evolved to make quick decisions based on immediate emotions rather than long-term consequences. That same programming that kept our ancestors alive is now the reason you have 7 different phone chargers, 3 barely used gym memberships on your credit card statement, and a kitchen gadget that promised to change your life but now just takes up counter space. But here's where things get interesting, and this is something that will probably surprise you. The intense desire you feel to buy something right now. That feeling doesn't last. In fact, it usually disappears within 72 hours. This is what psychologists call the cooling off period, and it's the foundation of the single most powerful anti-impulse buying strategy I've ever encountered. The 72-hour rule is stupidly simple. When you want to buy something that's not an absolute necessity, you wait 72 hours before making the purchase. Italiano. No complicated budgeting spreadsheets, no guilt trips, no dramatic declarations about never shopping again. You just wait 3 days. During those 3 days, you can think about the purchase as much as you want. You can research it, read reviews, compare prices, imagine all the ways it will improve your life. But you cannot buy it. Not for 72 hours. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds like torture, like I'm asking you to give up something you want for no good reason. But here's what actually happens when you implement this rule, and this is where the psychology gets fascinating. That urgent feeling you had at 11 p.m., the one that made you absolutely certain you needed this thing right now. By hour 24, it's already starting to fade. By hour 48, you're probably not even thinking about it anymore. And by hour 72, there's a really good chance you've completely forgotten why you wanted it in the first place. Let me tell you about something that happened to me last year that perfectly illustrates this principle. I was watching YouTube, minding my own business, when an ad came on for this portable espresso maker. The ad was incredible. Beautiful footage of someone making perfect espresso on a mountaintop, at the beach, in their car. The message was clear. With this $89 device, I could have cafe-quality coffee anywhere, anytime. And I'm not gonna lie, I was convinced. I was already imagining myself as the cool guy at the office, making fresh espresso at my desk, while everyone else was drinking regular coffee like peasants. My finger was literally on the add to cart button when I remembered my own rule. 72 hours. So I added it to a wish list instead, and went to bed. The next day, I thought about that espresso maker maybe twice. The day after that, not at all. And by day 3, when I was technically allowed to buy it, I realized something important. I don't even drink that much coffee. I have a perfectly good coffee maker at home. And realistically, when would I actually be making espresso on a mountain? I'm not exactly climbing mountains every weekend. The whole fantasy the ad sold me was complete fiction. That $89. I did underwaste on something that would have ended up in my closet next to the other impulse purchases I've made over the years. But here's what makes this even more powerful. It's not just about saving $89 on one purchase. When you start applying the 72-hour rule consistently, something remarkable happens to your brain. You begin to recognize the pattern of impulse buying before it happens. You start noticing the manipulation tactics that advertisers use. That sense of urgency. Manufactured. That feeling that you'll miss out if you don't buy now. Completely artificial. There is actually a term for what is happening in your brain when you see something you want to buy. It's called the dopamine spike. Your brain releases this feel-good chemical in anticipation of the reward you'll get from owning the thing. Not from actually owning it, mind you, but from the anticipation of owning it. This is why the moment you actually receive most impulse purchases, the excitement immediately deflates. You've already gotten the dopamine hit during the anticipation phase. But here's the beautiful part about the 72-hour rule. When you delay that gratification, one of two things happens. Either the dopamine spike fades, and you realize you didn't actually want the thing at all, or the desire persists, and you end up making a more thoughtful purchase that you actually appreciate win-win. Let me give you some real numbers to show you how powerful this can be. The average American makes about 12 impulse purchases per month. These purchases typically range from $20 to $200, with an average of around $75. That's $900 per month, or $10,800 per year spent on things people didn't plan to buy. Now, let's say you implement the 72-hour rule, and it only prevents 70% of those impulse purchases. That's still $7,560 per year that stays in your bank account instead of turning into clutter in your home. But wait. It gets better. If you take that $7,560 and invest it at an 8% return, in 10 years you'll have over $109,000. In 20 years, nearly $345,000. All from just waiting 3 days before buying stuff. The math is insane, but the psychology is even more interesting. When you successfully resist an impulse purchase, you're not just saving money. You're literally rewiring your brain. Every time you wait 72 hours and then decide not to buy something, you're strengthening the neural pathways associated with delayed gratification and weakening the pathways associated with impulsive behavior. It's like going to the gym, but for your financial decision-making muscles. There's also something fascinating that happens with your relationship to possessions. Before I started using the 72-hour rule, I was constantly thinking about what I wanted to buy next. My Amazon wish list was a mile long. I'd browse shopping sites when I was bored, always looking for the next thing that would make me happy. But after implementing this rule for a few months, something shifted. I stopped thinking about shopping as entertainment. I stopped using purchases as a way to feel better when I was stressed or bored. The things I did end up buying became more meaningful because they weren't just filling an emotional void. Now, let's talk about how to actually implement this rule in real life, because there are some nuances that make it work better. First, you need a system for tracking what you want to buy. I use a simple note on my phone where I write down the item, the price, and the date. When 72 hours have passed, I get a reminder to revisit the decision. Some people use a physical notebook. Others use spreadsheets. The tool doesn't matter as long as it works for you. Second, you need to be honest about what counts as a necessity. Groceries, not subject to the 72-hour rule. Medication, obviously exempt. But that fancy organic matcha powder that costs 3 times as much as regular tea? Yeah, that can wait 3 days. The key is distinguishing between needs and wants, and most of what we buy falls firmly into the wants category. Third, and this is crucial, you need to give yourself permission to still buy things after 72 hours. This isn't about never spending money or feeling guilty about purchases. It's about making intentional decisions instead of reactive ones. If you genuinely want something after 3 days of consideration, buy it. No guilt, no shame. You've done your due diligence. Here's something that might blow your mind. The 72-hour rule actually makes the things you do buy more enjoyable. There's research showing that anticipation is a huge part of pleasure. When you wait 3 days to buy something you genuinely want, you get to enjoy that anticipation period. And then when you finally make the purchase, it feels more significant because you've invested time and thought into the decision. I've also noticed that this rule has completely changed how I respond to sales and limited time offers. You know, those sale ends tonight emails that create artificial urgency. They used to work on me every single time. Now, when I see them, I just think, cool, if I still want this in 72 hours and it's no longer on sale, I'll pay full price. And you know what? I almost never end up buying those things. The urgency was the only reason I wanted them in the first place. There's also a social component to impulse buying that nobody talks about. When you see your friends buying new clothes, new gadgets, or going on expensive trips, there's this subtle pressure to keep up. The 72-hour rule creates a buffer that lets you evaluate whether you actually want something or if you're just trying to match someone else's lifestyle. This is huge, because comparison-based spending is one of the fastest ways to destroy your wealth. Let me address the most common objection I hear about this rule. What if the price goes up or the item sells out? Here's the reality check you need to hear. If something sells out during your 72-hour waiting period, it probably wasn't meant for you. There will be other products, other sales, other opportunities. The fear of missing out is just another manipulation tactic designed to get you to spend money before you had time to think clearly. And as for prices going up, unless you're buying something that's genuinely rare or limited edition, prices fluctuate constantly. That item might cost $10 more in 3 days, but it might also be $15 cheaper. And even if it does cost a bit more, you'll save far more money from all the purchases you don't make because of this rule. The 72-hour rule has saved me thousands of dollars, but more importantly, it's freed up mental energy that I used to spend thinking about stuff I wanted to buy. My apartment is less cluttered. My bank account is healthier. And I genuinely appreciate the things I do own because I've made thoughtful decisions about them. This is you and about depriving yourself or becoming some minimalist monk who owns 3 shirts and lives in a tiny house. It's about taking back control from the part of your brain that's constantly being manipulated by advertisers, influencers, and the entire consumer economy that profits from your impulsive decisions. So here's my challenge to you. Try the 72-hour rule for just 1 month. Write down everything you want to buy. That's not an absolute necessity. Wait 3 days, and then see how many of those purchases still feel important. I am willing to bet you'll be shocked at how much money you save and how little you actually miss the things you didn't buy. Your future self, sitting on a pile of money you didn't waste on impulse purchases, will thank you for it.